Hope you can see my Figma screen there. Okay, cool. Right. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to give my first forum talk. Today, I just want to share some of my lessons and takeaway I got from using Figma Make, specifically regarding prompting. And I tried to create a simple but a fully interactive form just to see if I can use it for my usability testing with the users. So to begin with, I just wanted to have a raw experience without having any bias from tutorials or articles to lean on. So I'm forced to figure it out quite organically. I'm still in the early stages of learning, so definitely have a long way to go. But I just wanted to start with some couple of behavioral aspects I noticed, and then we can go into details of design related stuff. But some of this might sound obvious, but would love to know if it resonated also with you as well. Let's go in. So the convenience of dictation. So I found typing long prompts repeatedly for revisions incredibly time consuming. So I have been dictating and it's been so much better. I know some people might find it quite odd to talking to it, but so you might notice that we don't at the moment have an inbuilt voice dictation feature in Figma Make at the moment. So I have set up a keyboard shortcut, which lets me to turn on the device dictation in any text field I need, which is quite honestly really helped. And especially for really long prompts when you have to go through multiple loops of long changes and stuff, especially for complex projects. And the next one I wanted to talk about is setting expectations on time. So what I mean about this is about setting expectation of how long the end-to-end process of prompting and designing is actually going to take. So in everyday use, when I'm using Claude or Duo, I'm kind of used to asking a question, getting an answer, maybe one or two follow-ups and kind of done after that. But prompting, of course, for design is an entirely different game. And that mental shift really helped me to write better prompts because I stopped expecting quicker outputs. Even if you're spending like 30 minutes to an hour going through multiple revisions, is probably still faster than designing something from scratch, at least in my instance. Obviously, that varies depending on the project's complexity. I don't want to blanket rule it for sure. But just knowing from the start that this wasn't going to be a quick one-shot process, that expectation alone helped me to stay really intentional and patient about getting the right output. And another thing I noticed is that it is definitely a weight game, especially when you're prompting styling details for an interactive prototype, let's say. It does takes a lot of time to process everything, of course, is because it's trying to change the entire design. But it's long, but it's not really long enough to switch between other tasks. So definitely patience is key. And understanding LLMs and pattern matching. So for me, it was quite a good reminder to understand how language learning models work when it comes to prompting. So LLMs are great, of course, as we would have known, at pattern matching, especially between words. So the closer our prompts are to familiar patterns, speech, and descriptions, I think the more precisely the model can predict the real intent of our thinking. So the way I understood that this was if I'm able to match my prompt as how the majority of the people would explain a design problem or provide a brief to someone, the better the output could be. This is, of course, easy to say, but hard to implement when you're prompting in real time, but it's still a good reminder to have in mind. So on this concept, it's also worth noting that Figma Make is now powered by Claude. I think it was a different model before. So for the basic prompting concepts of Claude applies to Figma Make as well. The next one is about prompting templates. So Figma does recommend creating templates for prompts, as we would know, but some of the key details they recommend is to have task, context, key design elements, constraints, and there's one more. I think it's in their blog. I can link that in. I tried to fill this in, but I found it quite tricky to fill it in a logical way for this particular concept I was working on. I might definitely get better with practice, I'm hoping. But guess in these instances, it might be better to create your own prompt in a way we think, perhaps, and then organize it in these buckets when with the help of Claude is what I think is going to work. But let's see how it goes with practice. And front loading or small iterations. So talking about templates, Figma refers this as a front loading a prompt. So as much information as you give to a prompt, like the more information you give is kind of called as front loading if you haven't heard of this before. So while I'm trying to understand how to best work with these templates, I found front loading too much information sometimes a little bit trickier, because if the output is not right, you kind of end up correcting it several times. But I found adding a clearer, shorter prompt to start with gives me a better initial blueprint to work on, and then adding more details on top of it is much easier for this particular one I'm working on. I can see how this could completely vary with different scenarios, and it could change with case-by-case basis, depending on the complexity of the project, of course. I also feel that front-loading or adding plenty of information to start with works really well if you have a crystal clear vision of what you're trying to achieve. If that's not the case, sometimes Figmas seem to be throwing me random layouts, and I would just end up going through multiple feedback loops to change it and bring it back to how it has to look like initially. So I was curious about this. And when I referenced into Claude's official prompt engineering guidelines, it does kind of mention a line which kind of says along the lines of chain or connecting complex prompts for stronger performance, which could hint into what I just mentioned about iterating as we go. But I would be curious to know how it is going to work for others as well, because I definitely don't think it's going to be a blanket rule for that's going to fit everything. And lastly, I just want to add some observations I had about design. So at one point, I caught myself naturally manually adjusting the spacing in my layout, like either by text fields or individual layouts, only to realize I didn't have to do that at all. So instead tweaking value by value, I just copied the entire Pajama design systems spacing guideline back into Figma Make, and that instantly kind of made the layout almost 80% perfect in terms of spacing. Of course, I still had to make some adjustments, but it definitely helped. Now saying that, I'm trying to remember, did I really prompt to directly for it to go and look into pajamas by itself? I'm not sure if I remember how that worked. It probably might not have worked, which might have made me to copy it manually, but it worked in the end. And a few other styling things I found interesting to observe were things that if you do not mention specifically to Figma, the Figma is going to make the decision for you, which I found it really interesting. For example, if you do not specifically mention the size of something, let's say a text field, you're more likely to get a full width element, which you would end up having to change the size of. And there are a few other things like that. And I think I think the more we practice with it, and we will probably learn the way Figma is having those unique behaviors and learn to act alongside with that. And on that note, I just want to quickly show you what I created. Again, it's a very simple form, but it's kind of interactive at the moment. It's not perfect yet, but let me stop and share my Figma again. There it is. Okay. 1 second. Right. So this is the form, very simple form. It's just a multi-step, 4-step form. You've got some accordions here, which kind of works. And this is the main bit. So there are 2 upload files here. One is mandatory and one is not. And without uploading the mandatory file, we're kind of blocking the page. So let's say I click the page to continue without uploading any of the files. You won't be able to do that because it's throwing an error. And let's try and upload a document to it. And in the first instance, it's throwing an error. And I kind of told Figma that this is the pattern I want it to be. So first time you upload a file, it throws an error. The second time I upload a file, it's going to be successful. So let's test that. It's successful. So now the user would be able to move on to the next page. So that's the next page as well. You can swift between the pages, which was I was quite impressed. It was able to do that. And pretty much that's about it. And I also wanted to mention that if you do want to learn more about how Figma Make is thinking about the way we prompt, this little reasoning accordion dropdown is quite impressive because it kind of shows you what it's thinking. I initially did not even know that I would be able to expand it because while you're prompting, it kind of whizzes past lots of text, but that's quite useful to look into as well. But yeah, I was quite impressed overall with the output of what I was able to achieve with the interactive one, but excited to use for more complex projects and can't wait to see what everyone else is going to use it as well for. Thank you.
Thanks, Divya.
Thank you.
We on the design system side of things, we are looking to explore how to have our own, basically how to have the design system be more easily consumable by both Figma as well as our engineering teams. And so if anyone here has ideas on how to do that or what might benefit, leave a note in that linked issue. This is something we're looking at right now. One thing I was hearing is that maybe we should just output the entire foundation section in a single page so it's more easily consumed by the models. So that way you don't have to just do the spacing. You can do the entire layout and foundation section into the prompt. All right. Does anyone else have any more questions or comments for Divya? No.